everybody. I'm so excited. We are back. It is the month of May. I just had a great weekend celebrating Mother's Day with my family, and I had some awesome Mother's Day guests. But everybody says it's Mother's Day. My grandmother used to tell me every day is Mother's Day, right? So I want to say the month of May is the month for mothers, right? May is the month for mothers. So we're going to celebrate Mother's Day all month long. So when this airs, it still will be Mother's Day. So I have some fantastic women joining me today. And if you notice, I said joining me. Rap is not with us. Why? Because he is not a dang on mother, and we didn't want him on the show today. And Mr. Rapping will be back in June, joining us for our Father's Day episode. And stay tuned. We have some great, fantastic guests joining us there. So I have the honor of serving as host by myself on this Mother's Day month. So welcome everybody back. On today's episode, we would like to take a moment to recognize all of the mothers out there, specifically the mothers who cannot be with their children today because of the forces at play within the judicial system, and all the mothers who are doing their best no matter the circumstances. We see you, we recognize you, and we send your love. As we have discussed numerous times on this podcast, the criminal legal system strips away the basic human rights of people every day. We're going to spend the next 40 minutes discussing how many mothers are affected by mass incarceration and the ways in which many public defenders find balance between their roles as mothers and the overwhelming responsibility of their careers. Today, we are happy to welcome two of my very special guests, Jacinta Hall and Shirley Billingley. Jacinta was part of our second ever class in 2008, Gideon's Promise class of public defenders. She was a baby lawyer in Mississippi when I first met her. She was also a single working mother who faced many obstacles in joining the profession. Public defenders have the hardest jobs, and being a single parent while trying to juggle overwhelming caseloads can seem like an impossible task. Jacinta is currently an assistant federal public defender in Jackson, Mississippi, an adjunct professor at the University of Mississippi School of Law. Welcome, Jacinta, to our show.
Hello.
And then my other special guest is Shirley Billingley. And this woman, you guys, I call her Miss Shirley. We all call her Miss Shirley. And so I will be referring to her as that because we are like family. Miss Shirley, in contrast to Jacinta's role as a public defender, saw the courtroom very differently. She was in a different section of the courtroom. Miss Shirley has experienced two of her children being sentenced to long prison terms. Today, we are going to discuss with her what it was like as a mother, as the challenges she faced, visiting her children, seeing her children, raising her family, and what impact it had on her, it being in and out of the legal system for decades of time. Welcome, Jacinta. Welcome, Miss Shirley.
Thank you much.
We are so happy to have you here. So I'm gonna get started. Miss Shirley, I'm so happy to see you.
I'm happy to see you too. It's been a while, huh?
Yes, and you look fabulous. I need your secret. What is the secret?
Black don't crack.
Black don't crack. That's right, Miss Shirley. All right, I'm going to get started with some questions, and right now we're just going to have a conversation. Jacinta, the United States, right now we are right in the middle of the Roe v. Wade challenge happening in the Supreme Court right now, right? So another thing that's going against women, right? Another law, legal system that's impacting the lives and the choice of women. And we have seen this play out in United States history for a long, long time. Society is often less understanding of working mothers. While some states have made progress, right, and have shifted and have adapted the work culture, the work-life balance of mothers, there are still hundreds and hundreds of counties across the country that do not pay attention to the needs of working mothers. In what way has the stereotype of oh, you're a mom, you can't work and raise a child at the same time. What ways has that stereotype affected you in your career?
So I'll go back a little bit. I worked for 3 years as a public defender before I got pregnant with my son. And so I was dealing with not only becoming a working mom, I was also dealing with the stereotype of being a working single mom. And so growing up in Mississippi and being the daughter of a pastor and a teacher, right? I was also dealing with the whole thing of getting pregnant and not being married. So I had all of this stuff that was going on and all of those stereotypes, that were befalling me. And then I was also the minister of music at a prominent Baptist church at the same time, right? So I had all of this going on. And so, but what I learned about that, and what people suppose or think that you can and cannot do, and a lot of people, it came from a genuine place. But I was determined to not buy into the stereotype of what I could and could not do. I literally worked. And even though when I was pregnant, and you remember, Illy, when I met you all and I had that sciatica back issue happening, walking with a cane, up until I delivered my son. I literally worked until the week before he came. My son was born on a Monday. I worked until like the Thursday or Friday before he came. So I was determined to do everything I could do to make sure that me being a single parent was not going to be, there was no impediment to me doing my job. But, I have to give kudos to my boss at the time, Bill LaBar at the Hinds County Public Defender's Office, and every coworker I had who, from people helping me walk down the street to court, to when I got back, making sure I had a safe place to pump, and giving me the extra time that I needed to kind of, do everything that I needed to do. I had some really good people working around me. I know people have all kinds of stereotypes about Mississippi, but I am very grateful for the people that I was working around who were making sure that I could do my job whichever way I wanted to do it. And just my personality, I was jumping in with both feet, ready to go. As soon as my maternity leave was over, I was, back at it, trying cases and everything. So it was an adjustment, but it was one by which my village, my work village and my home village were able to help me transcend.
But because of the stereotype that it sounds like you were Superwoman, because that's another label we get.
Yes, it is.
And for our listeners today, the women on here are Black women, right, who are also bear a lot of the burden, and we can have it all and do it all. Did you feel pressure in having to walk down to the courthouse with a sciatic and be 8-9 months pregnant and be at training with your infant, which I remember, after he was born? Did you feel like you had to do it because you were pushing against the stereotype, or is that just you naturally?
And so I actually thought about that. Part of that is just me naturally, like I am just gonna be, I'm just one that is going to do whatever I need to do. And that is the weight that we as Black women hold, right? We've got to do everything. My grandmothers, I get it from them. My own mother, who was in the military when she had me, was an educator and doing all kinds of stuff. I don't know how to sit down, right? So that was part of it. But then there were times when I felt like, okay, I need to take a step back. I want to take a step back, but will I give into this stereotype if I tell them I'm becoming overwhelmed? And that's something that, when Black women say, hey, I'm overwhelmed, it's not received the same as when other women say I'm overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. When other people say I'm overwhelmed, there's a whole corral. But then when a Black woman says it, it's kind of like, oh, well, you can't handle it, kind of situation. So yes, that was a part of it as well.
So Ms. Shirley, I'm going to turn to you on this question as well, because you were a working mom. Yes. Dealing with the same challenges. Did you have the same experience that Jacinta describes in terms of like, oh, you can't have these babies and work at the same time and the children do well? Was that the same thing that you faced when you were raising your children?
Of course. But we had to you had to work to survive, and I had to take care after my divorce. then I had to step in, and you have to be a mother and a father. Even though it was a good thing that we were raised up with the mother and father in the household, but it gave me more strength to do so. To take care of my children, work a good paying job, just that stamina, just to be, I'm going to be a strong woman regardless of what's going on around me. What we went through, we just have to keep praying and being strong. Because I think that's another one of our women, the Black women do, is they pray a lot.
Yes.
Pray a lot, and it gives us a lot of strength. Even though we have our weakness, we do have our falls and we have our weaknesses. But when you start praying, he comes through with the strength, and he gives you that double strength.
All right.
Amen.
And I was going to ask, where did you find your strength? But you answered that question for me already, Miss Shirley. So, Jacinta, the balance, and Miss Shirley, I'm going to ask you the same question, because you mentioned, is the balance between, for you, Jacinta, motherhood and public defense, right? Because we have to remember, this is Gideon's promise to talk about public defenders. So how do you balance? People always tell me you got to have work-life balance. Me personally, I don't know. I just work and have a life. It just goes hand in hand. But how do you balance those two? I think those are the terms that the rest of the society uses. How do you balance them?
Well, for me, being a public defender, and Ms. Shirley talks about prayer and, that the relationship that we have with, for me, with God and religion has really kind of helped me, because being a public defender kind of bleeds into my balance. It is my balance. And so when I go to work every day, it doesn't feel like work, right? It feels like I'm taking care. And, it's kind of like that caretaker that, Black women have to be. And it's, so when I go to work, and I remember when I interviewed for the job that I had now, and they asked me, like, what was one of my, what did I think that I was best at in being a public defender? And I told them it's client relations, because, with this caretaker role, I kind of use that in dealing with my clients. I, am kind of like that, surrogate mother with them. I'm being upfront with them, and I'm telling them when we're talking, I'm like, look, this is, what's happening. This is what's going on. I take care to explain to them, just like I do my son, about, his schoolwork and everything else. Like when I'm getting ready to punish him, I explain to him what's about to happen, because I want him to understand what he's about to deal with. And so I do that with my clients. So for me, my work-life balance is just a natural fit. This is like, being a public defender and advising my clients, kind of being that mother for them in the system, kind of is a role that comes naturally to me.
Can you describe a little bit? You talked about being the mother in the system and helping. Can you describe what has been your experience with working with family members? I love doing this show because it's really important to me. We talk about the impact the criminal legal system has on the people who are incarcerated or getting or thrown into the system, but we often don't talk about the families, right, who are impacted by the incarceration. And can you talk about just how your relationship with the family members of your clients have been as you have done this career?
Well, it depends on the families, but at the end of my cases, I will tell you that the families and I are on the same page. It may start off a little rocky sometimes, because they come in with preconceived notions about me as a public defender and how that is going to factor into their loved one's case, because they don't know me. So they don't know how I'm going to perform. But then once we've had a couple of sessions and they see how, passionate I am about their client, about their loved one, and talking about their stories and telling their stories, then I have a lot of families who really, really, really appreciate me. And a lot of family members that I still talk to, like when the case is in, they'll call me with opinions, Ms. Hall, what do you think about this? Or I know that, you don't represent my son or daughter anymore, but what do you think about this? And I take those phone calls. I know a lot of people feel a certain way about, well, I don't represent your loved one anymore, so, I don't talk to you or whatever. But I think it's very important to involve the family in what's happening, because they are your biggest asset. The families are the ones that are going to, I know that they, without a doubt, love their loved ones. So they're going to be the ones that's going to give you information that can, break the holes in the cases and can make all the difference in the world. I remember walking the streets of Memphis with one of my client's sisters, and she was pointing out places and telling me people and introducing me to witnesses. It made all the difference in the world to that particular case.
Let's talk about families. So, Miss Shirley, I started in my intro talking about two of your children, two of the three of your children,
right,
who have been impacted by the system. Can you talk about your oldest child, Serena, and what happened to her?
What happened to her at a young age? Got involved in the system. Well, got involved with the wrong crowd, I should say. Mm-hmm. And then she was incarcerated for it was on a federal case. Mm-hmm. So she was incarcerated with had to do with drugs. Mm-hmm. And even knowing that person put her in a bad position. Mm. And in the company of we're not knowing the laws, how it is. And so when they came down with it, they had a lot of people involved in the ring. So she was involved as well in that ring, and was sentenced, which was very, very hard for me to accept. Mm-hmm. And not knowing the law system, how they were, and being a minority. Mm-hmm. They knew that, okay, she's a minority. And then the fact about being sentenced at that time was a hard pill to swallow. You know how you get one of them big old pills the doctor get, and you be like, oh no, I can't swallow this.
Yes, ma'am.
That's the way it seemed to me, like you couldn't swallow, you couldn't breathe, you was choking. But and a lot of the family was there at the time of the sentencing, crying, and upset. But I was very upset at that time, not understanding why they had to be shipped out of state to mm-hmm. another place, regardless of how we felt, regardless if we could afford to go, mm-hmm. visit her at that time, moving them around to different places and not having any notification. So that was and then the impact on me was the fact of having two. That's what really was hard. Mm-hmm. And then the fact about getting myself together, as far as when you raise a child, you say, oh, I'm working hard. You work hard for your child. Mm-hmm. And something like this happens. It's a big impact, mm-hmm. mentally, physically.
Mm-hmm. And Miss Shirley, Serena was 19 years old when this started, right? So she was a kid. She was a kid. So your baby. Yeah. Right. Right. And she spent, if my stats were correct and my information, she was sentenced to mandatory minimum 16 years.
Yes.
And the federal, and at the time they had mandatory minimums. And so that you had to do the full time until President Clinton got involved, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
And released a number of people, including Serena, right. Thank goodness, who were under those sentence structures. Right. Can you talk a little bit? And I also understand you also have a son. Serena is out, so for our listeners, and we'll talk a little bit more about Serena's story in a minute, but this is primarily about Miss Shirley's story, but we'll talk about what she decided to do. But you also have a son, Jerome, who is incarcerated, and the situation happened in 1995 when he was one of two men who fired shots into a car in Minneapolis, striking one man, killing one, and in those shots injured someone else. And this was over 27 years ago. And I understand, I have heard so much about Jerome, and I know the family calls him Rome. So I call him Rome because Serena does.
Right.
He has completely changed his life, right? While in prison.
Yes.
And still, and has paid his debt to society. And so my question for you, Ms. Shirley, having two children, one who went through the system, and because of the government, right, the Clinton administration releasing one, another was still there. How do you give Jerome hope, right? You had to do Serena Andrew. Like, how do you do that?
Well, like I said earlier, it's like, I don't know, it's just like instilled in us from a young age, from having strong parents. They came from Mississippi, where my parents came from.
Yay.
And yay. Like, oh yeah, that's my town, Mississippi.
Yeah.
My mother being a strong woman and a praying woman as well, gave me that strength because, like I said, we have our weaknesses, but we have our strength. Our strength overrides the weakness that we have. And then to have this, that happened to my son, I was like, oh my God. But I'm gonna say a quick story. When you pray a lot, God always comes in your life. He's gonna show you something, a vision or something. I had a vision at an early age before that even happened when they were young, that there was gonna be some kind of destruction, but I didn't know where it was coming from. So I think that impacted my life, where when it was so devastating for me, it could have been worse.
Gotcha.
But God already gave me the strength to survive what was coming upon me as a parent, as a mother. And I, when that happened, what kept me strong and kept him strong is prayer, like I said before, to give him. Sometimes I might have had bad days and I might have been feeling a little bit down when I talked to him, but to lift him up, I had to tell him, we're going to keep on praying, because my mother was a praying woman. His grandmother was a praying woman. I told him, I said, God's going to make a way no matter how long it takes. I said, we're going to make this happen. We're going to make it through these trials and tribulations. And I think that's why over these years that I've been traveling, going to see him going back and forth, seeing Serena, God made a way because he gave me another child that started working for Delta.
Oh, yeah.
So right there, you have to look at your things around you and say, you know what, Lord, you made a way for me. Because see, I didn't have to come out of my pocket. I started traveling through the grace of God and didn't have to pay a dime to be supportive to my children. So right there, I tell you that prayer works because he made a way.
He made a way. Miss Shirley, can you tell our listeners, because some folks, they're hearing this for the first time, they don't understand how the federal system works.
Right.
So when Serena was in the federal system, Jerome is still in Minnesota, right?
Yeah, he's in the state system.
Yeah, right, in the state system. So when Serena was arrested and sentenced, she was sentenced federally. And you started telling the story about she was sent away. They weren't being concerned about the impact or sent away. Can you tell me what you went through to see her? Like, where was she during her time?
I believe the first place was in Kentucky.
So, and you were living in Minnesota at the time.
Yeah, I was living in Minnesota.
And you had to get to Kentucky to visit your daughter.
Yes, I had to get to Kentucky to get to my daughter. So I was like, oh, I got to go see her. So what happened was I went to the store. Back then it was 7-Eleven. And I said, I went in there and I said, you know what? I said, I told the man at the thing, I said, let me play some of your cash threes. And he said, okay, you can play. So I played cash 3 and I put 3 threes on there. And I paid I had like $6 or something like that. That's all the money I had in my pocket. I took all my change out of my pocket and I played that number. So when I was with my brother, we pulled up and we had got us some soda and stuff. We come outside, we was talking in the car. Here comes the manager. He said, ma'am. I said, yeah, how can I help you? I thought I had did something wrong. He said, you just won. I said, what? He said, yeah, you won $750. That was my ticket money for the first time to go see my daughter.
Wow.
That's why I'm saying things happen when you still have faith, no matter what. He always makes a way. So that was my first ticket to Kentucky that I ever had.
Wow.
And I didn't have, but I had like maybe $6 or $7 in my pocket.
Wow.
And then I was already wondering, how am I going to get down here to see my daughter? And that's how I got my first flight ticket.
And then where else was she in prison since?
California.
Mm.
Then they shipped her. The next thing I know, she called me mom. They got, they just come up and get you just like that. Just they don't, have no notification.
Mm.
Next thing I hear, she's gone from Kentucky. Then she goes to California. Now here we got to spend money again. Right. Going to California.
And Miss Shirley, so our listeners know you're not worth millions, right? So you right.
I'm a working mother trying to survive and take care of the other, my other two. Other two in support with Rome. And so this is what happened. This is before Rome got incarcerated, though. See, so what happened was, I'm thinking that Charlita was working for the Delta at that time. I believe so, but if not, I still gotta wait. So because I went with, I had support from the family. It was my cousin, my niece. We all went, and then my daughter. We all went to California to visit her there. It's just going through the formalities of the system, the way they treat you, the way they talk to you, you kind of down, they down and out. They just want, come over here. It's like, it's almost like they kind of treat you like you still on the slave plantation. For me, that's the way they talk to you. They have no respect for the parents and the family members that come and see their loved ones. They want to talk down to you. They want to, they look at you like you're not really important to them.
Yeah. So when Jacinta, so you're the lawyer, right? So you're trying to prevent things from happening like happened to Serena and Jerome. Are you notified when things happen to your clients, whether they're in a detention facility waiting for trial, or now the trial has happened, they've been sentenced, and a lot of times public defenders don't know what happened to their clients after. But some of your clients you still remained in touch with, right? So does the state notify you? Does the federal government, now that you're with the federal government, do they tell you anything as the lawyer?
So I'll talk about the federal government first. And I want to touch on something that Ms. Shirley talked about with the BOP, or the Bureau of Prisons. And so when she was talking about Serena moving around, the Bureau of Prisons now has a policy statement by which their goal, and quote unquote, is to ensure that those who have been convicted and incarcerated, that they stay as close to home as possible. But and since this is Mother's Day and we're talking about women, there are fewer female facilities around the country than there are male facilities. And so while there may be male facilities, in every state, there is not one in every state for women. And I don't know where all of the female facilities are, but I know in Mississippi, we don't have one. The closest one that we have is in Aliceville, Alabama, which is about 5 hours away from where I am. Is close to Huntsville, Alabama. And I think that the one closest on the east side from there is going to be in Florida. So they're not everywhere. So it does mean that families have to travel farther to see their female incarcerated loved ones. But in terms of notifications, absolutely not. If they are in pretrial custody, you will likely get some kind of notification. On the federal side with the U.S. Marshals, you'll get notification faster than you would on the state side, just because of, more money in federal government. Things are a little bit tighter in terms of, what obligations they have to notify the lawyer. But on the state side, you'll get notifications if something catastrophic happens. But post-conviction, you don't get any notification most times, because at that point, as a public defender, your representation ends. So there are times on the federal side where incarcerated convicted individuals can petition the court for post-conviction release and relief. And so when they get that, when they write the court for particular relief motions, the court will then appoint us as counsel again, and then we can, go and reestablish that line of communication with our clients.
So is this new? Because when Serena was incarcerated, it was in the 90s, right? Mm-hmm. And the 90s were something, right? So the war on drugs, the war on crime, all of the rhetoric, right? So it made it very difficult for people to get released or relief, or family members like Miss Shirley to visit loved ones. So is this what you're describing, Jacinta, a more recent turn of events with the Bureau of Prisons, or has it always existed and we as family members just didn't know about it?
So I've not been with the federal government long enough. And of course, in the 90s, I was still traversing high school and college.
Please do not say that. For the people who were not in,
yeah, she didn't know nothing about that at that time.
She didn't know about that. Okay, we're gonna give her a pass on
that. But I will say that the Bureau of Prisons did not, and this has been codified, right, in our First Step Act that Trump signed into law in 2018 that the Obama administration was working on prior to Trump ascending to office in 2016. So the First Step Act did a whole lot of things. And one of the things that it did was enlarge the compassionate release avenue for clients who are incarcerated in federal facilities to have ways to petition the courts, because the compassionate release statute has been on the books for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it was a way that the incarcerated individuals could petition the wardens of the federal prisons for relief based on medical conditions, age, and there was a provision under D that talks about other reasons. So any other reason that, the warden should give you an opportunity to be released early. So this is a different thing from like a pardon or a commutation of a sentence. But they weren't utilizing it. So you had people who were literally dying in federal facilities who had a way to get out, but the wardens were not granting it. So after this got on politicians' radar, and they started to work on it during the end of President Obama's administration, when President Trump was elected, he signed the First Step Act into law in 2018. So this kind of, to answer your question, it was probably building in the 90s and 2000s. Okay. The fact that there were very limited means for people who were incarcerated to get any kind of relief. So there are more traditional means. One is what they call a 2255. It's like an ineffective assistance of counsel if something happened in your case that your lawyer did not do. But you had limited access to those things. So it was, you could only do it once, right? And so as, certain laws changed and they were deciding, like with the crack and cocaine disparities, whether apply it retroactively. At first, when they came up with those disparities, they weren't applying it retroactively, and then they did. And so, people were pushing back. So while the 90s was building our prison populations, the 2000s was starting to recognize those problems. But we're in 2022 and just now seeing some of those means of relief.
Yeah, and this is only happening, primarily happening on the federal level.
On the federal level.
And I think our listeners need to understand a lot of the atrocities and the unfair sentencing are happening on the state level, which is where Miss Shirley's son is in Minnesota, is state related, right? And so that relief is not as prevalent or accessible, and we have to find other means to help people get released after spending decades and decades of incarceration. And I'll just make a note about that fact of legalizing marijuana, and we still have people sitting in prison right there for selling it, which is now legal. But that's for another show on another time. So I want to turn it back because we're going to kind of close out our show and just talk about mothers. Miss Shirley, you've been supporting your children their whole lives, right? And you're a great mother. You're a great mother. And my question and grandmother, I got can't.
Yeah, I'm a grandma now because it's so funny how time goes on. And I even, when my son being incarcerated, when his children were little, 2 and 3, 4 years old, 5, when they could walk, I would gather those children up in my car, put them in the back seat and in a baby's car seat, and take them to go see their dad.
Wow. I
have pictures I can look back on, and he can look back on and see his children. So as they were growing up, my support to him was, okay, I would do this. I would step in and do some of the things that the mother wouldn't do. Gotcha. I did it as the grandmother for my son because I'm his mom. So I gave him that support as well, because he needed to have that bond with his children. So they can't say, I never had any kind of contact with my dad, but they've had it ever since they were able to walk. I've held those children in my arm just for them to be there to take pictures with their dad. Wow. It was a hard road to go, but I made it. So I just thank God for that. And I'm looking forward to even better things. And as the young lady was saying, things are changing. It's slow, but the state is slower than the federal right now. As far as granting, those for release, I think the system is really slow and they're just whacked. So I'm just gonna put it in that nice way. You don't want me to get the cuss and
Yes, Shirley, I thought you were about to say one of the words.
I'm say my religion and a Christian lady here, but behind the scene.
So
anyway,
Miss Shirley, what advice, and thank you for sharing that story, because you did what my grandmother did for my sisters and my brother and I.
Right.
She took us every Saturday to Attica Correctional Facility.
That's
up
right.
Until I was up until my father's release.
Right.
And that meant the world, because I got to know him that way. It wasn't the ideal way, but at least I knew who he was and that he loved me and he cared about me.
Yeah.
And so what advice would you give other mothers who find themselves in a similar situation that you are in with incarcerated children? What advice would you give them?
My advice is that, first of all, like I was saying, prayer changes things. And another thing that I did create, my son and I created a website for prisoners, because it's for parents and prisoners. So that way we could interlock with the mothers that are unable. There's a lot of mothers that are unable to travel. So my advice is that the mothers that are able to travel, to give out that reach out and say, reach one, touch one. Touch that other mother and that family, and let them know that we have support with each other, like a village, like a community, that we can also help the defenders that are also working hard. I give praise to them as well for their jobs, and that we can reach out to other mothers and call them and say, hey, I just want to call you and let you know I'm here to support you. If I come into the state that you're there to go see my son and your son's there, I'm willing to pick you up, and I've done that.
Oh, that's
so
great.
The thing is that we have to work together. We have to stay together to make everything strong. Because if we don't stay together and work together and build each other up, we'll never get anything accomplished.
Yeah, that's so true.
But if we can force together and make this happen as a, should I say, as a organization, supporting prison mothers.
Miss Shirley, what is the name of the website? Because we want to make sure our listeners check it out, support.
I think it's Parents of Prisoners or something like that. I'll get back with you on that.
If you can do that, that would be great. And we'll share it on our website so people can support your efforts, because there are people who will give money to help support these efforts. And I know Jacinta's clients and families, would truly appreciate support, because we can make this is one big community, one big organization of people supporting.
Well, I thank you so much for that, because and we have a lot of supporters already that have had interaction with their loved ones that they're not able to go see, but they're able to send messages, prayers. They have prayer scriptures, and strengthen them, while they're locked up, because a lot of parents are sick. They're older, they're sick, they're not able to go as like they used to. So we have to still support those that are unable to go. Check on them, let them know we love them.
And Jacinta, can you talk a little bit about, we talked about mothers on the outside who've been supporting their children who are on the inside, juveniles and adult children. Can you talk about the mother, there are women who are incarcerated who are mothers. So Miss Shirley talked about her daughter being moved around, who wasn't a mother at the time, right? But still, like the movement around of women, you talked about, Jacinta, there aren't as many women in prisons in the federal system, and not a lot in the state either, like in the various state systems. Can you tell a little bit about the impact the system has on mothers who are incarcerated and what you've seen from your perspective?
Well, and so unfortunately, the number of mothers becoming incarcerated, particularly Black mothers, is rising.
It's rising.
Yes. And, as Black mothers, we're the pillars of our families, whether we are married to our children's fathers or not, Black women are the staples in the Black home. And so to see those mothers have to start navigating the systems that they haven't usually navigated is really difficult. And so a lot of mothers I see, and the few that I have represented, the unique issues, and I was thinking as we were talking, most of my clients are, reluctant to go to trial. So they're not gonna, if they are charged with, the more serious offenses, they are reluctant to go to trial, not because they're not guilty or innocent, but because of the other factors that they have to consider. Well, I need to get out of jail right now because I got to get back to my kids. I got to get out of jail right now because I'm gonna lose my job. And if I lose my job, then we're gonna lose our homes, because these mothers and grandmothers are the pillars of their families, and them being absent creates all kinds of issues for that family. So it's been really, really difficult to represent the mothers in my work, and I have represented too many, not a lot, but one is too many. And fortunately, though, Black women, if they, are involved in whatever that they have been charged with, they step up, they admit their faults, they work really, really hard to become, stellar members of society. They are the ones who go out there and do above and beyond the task that the court has put on them, probation, and they recognize where they've fallen and they try their best to get back up. Unfortunately, though, some of my clients have, are in the system because of drug addiction, and there are too few facilities, too few programs to help them to best their addictions. And so I have seen a lot of mothers get caught up in those addictions without the proper outlets. And those mothers are the ones that keep coming back. And it's very heartbreaking to see, because they just can't overcome. And, America is not fond of taking care of our mentally ill or drug addicted women.
So I'm gonna ask one last question to Miss Shirley. And we talked about Serena. We talked about, so there's Serena, there's Rome, there's Shy. You have 3 children who are fantastic people, right? And I want to talk about the impact. Serena was released, right? Her sentence was commuted, and she was released, and she became a public defender. Miss Shirley, why did she do that? Because she went to a great undergrad. She went to one of the best law schools in the country, Michigan, right? And that was hard for her. That was hard. And
Yeah.
people have to understand, if you have been convicted of a crime and you try to get into law school, it is very difficult to pass the character and fitness portion of that. And I watched her go through that when she was trying to get barred in Georgia. But she became a public defender. She's in private practice now. But when she was graduated from law school, she became a public defender. Miss Shirley, why do that? Why not go to corporate law and make a whole lot of money for Coca-Cola?
Well, her heart was a giving heart. And that's the thing, when someone does something for you, you want to, it's like almost like a cycle. When good comes to you, you put back out good. And she was a praying, because they told me, Mom, every time we turn around, you want us at church. I'd be like, we're going to church this Sunday morning. We're going to Bible study this Sunday morning. And it sticks with you. So when you got good impact in your life, you got good people in your lives. That Judge Sam Shelton was another one, impacted her life, starting out, helping her out. She wanted to return the favor to help someone else. And when you have them kind of people in your life, even though you have a profession, you can feel the giving and the support of other people. As this young lady, I feel that she's a hard worker, Jacinta. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm very proud of you, and I will be praying for you. You'll be on my prayer line now, girl. I'm believing on the prayer line.
Yes, ma'am. I can feel it. Thank you.
For all you young, beautiful young ladies. And that's what she did. She just had support. And I mean, she prayed a lot, and God opened doors. Thank God I got the best son-in-law. He's really my son-in-law. The Lord said, I give you one, but now I'm giving you two. So I thank God for that, for the blessings that he's restored upon us and this family. But she's a giving person. She went to, and God opened doors for her. She was some of the best. These are top schools.
She did.
You can't get in there, and it's hard. Especially with her record, you know that had to be the Lord working. He opened up the doors for them as well. He keeps my son-in-law protected. And I just thank God for that. I mean, I don't claim to be perfect, but I know one thing. I do know how to pray. I know that will work. And it works for me. It works for my family. He just extended out the blessings that she has. And I also wanted to input on, Jacinta spoke about the mothers, in prison, the females in prison. I was in the organization, but since the 2020 pandemic came up, we had to stop it from our church at Berean Christian Church. Pastor Curran Lee is our pastor. I was in an organization called Forever Families.
Oh yes, I know Forever Families. Yes, ma'am.
So I was going to the prisons. Not only seeing my children, but seeing other people's children.
Yeah, that's great, Michelle.
And going in there take the children, we get them and we give them iPads, and while we're on the bus, and we got a meal. We get there, we set up luncheons for them, so that way they can interact with their children, the mothers of the prison. So that was it's a good program to be in. So I advise any mother that to interact, with the system, so we know what's going on. We want to keep up on what they're doing, because if we don't show interest, they don't show interest.
That's a good point. And on that note, we're going to close out our episode, our Mother's Day, or I'm calling Mother's Month, where I want to thank you, Jacinta Hall, Assistant Federal Public Defender for the state of Mississippi, Miss Shirley Billingley, who is the proud mom of 3 fantastic children. And I hope I get to interview Rome really soon, and hear his story and hear about his stories with you and how you supported him through his journey. I want to thank our listeners for joining us. Gideon's Promise, the podcast, and in true former fashion, our co-host John Rapping can't be here today, but I'm Ilham Askia, and he's John Rapping on an airplane right now, wrapping it up.